Today on Pots and Trowels we're going to prune this really old established wisteria, and that's brought to you with the support of Cobra Garden and Allett. Hello, welcome to Pots and Trowels. Well, today we're out in the garden going to do some winter pruning on wisteria. Now, wisteria is one of my favourite late spring, early summer climbers. Absolutely love the flowers, mainly blue, but of course you can get white ones, and they are quite scented, and they're great for covering pergolas, fences, trellis and walls. And of course you can control them and get them to the size you want. If you've only got a small fence, then that is fine. You train it and you prune it to keep it within its bounds. But if you've got a larger wall, then you can let them do their own thing. And this one here is a really old specimen, and I love it when they get like this because they've got so much charm and character with all these twisted stems. And just look at this. This is the trunk of this wisteria. Now, I don't know how old this is, but I'm guessing, having seen some others, that this is probably 150 years old or even more. And when they get to this size and age, you can really let them grow. And this one has grown not only on this side of this building, but it's decided then to grow over the wall through the archway, and it's completely covered the gable end at the other side. What we're trying to do when we're pruning in the winter is to encourage flower buds. And if we look at some of these stems here, we can see these are what we call the flowering spurs. It's these short growths like this that we get on the wisteria, and it's these buds here that will develop into the flowers later on in the season. So this is going to be absolutely full of flower. And of course, once they get really old like this one, they don't tend to make as much of that vigorous growth that a young plant does. Now remember, in the summer we also do a little bit of pruning, so lots of the excessive growth that's not been needed will have been pruned off, and at this time of the year we just do a tidy up and take out any dead wood, that type of thing. If you've got a wisteria and you've got these hanging on it, don't fear, these are pods, because the wisteria is a member of the pea and bean family, the legume family, and they look a little bit like runner beans, and inside there are some seeds that you could grow if you want to, but bear in mind they can often take 15 years from sowing the seeds to producing flowers, and the flowers won't necessarily be the same as the parent plant, because nowadays most wisterias are grafted and named varieties. But it's a bit of fun if you want. But if you see these hanging on there, it's nothing to worry about. You can leave them on if you like the look, but I tend to take them off at this time of the year. So what we've got here, we've got all these lovely old fruit, these flowering spurs like this. There's no extension growth, but occasionally this is one that would have been topped back. This would have been a long growth, maybe a metre long. It was topped back last August time. So any growths like this, you would cut back to just 2 or 3 buds like this. And there's a bud round the side here, there's a bud there, doesn't matter which one. We're just going to cut that back, and you can see there we've got that nice clean cut, the bud there, and then these will develop into flowers. So we would go around straight away and shorten any of these growths like this, just to make sure that we're encouraging the flower. Now, where this is also established, you occasionally get a little bit of dead growth in here. So we can see that this one is living. We've got the buds. There's no buds on here, and in fact it's broken off in my hand. So anything you think is dead, just go round and just snip that off with your secateurs, and we've got a bit of dead here. It happens on older ones particularly, and if we cut it back to a nice clean cut, it will prevent that rot or dead wood going back into the living wood, and it also tidies up these flowering spurs like that. What we can also do with them, just pop that there, if they're getting congested, you can do a little bit of thinning with them as well. These aren't too bad. So that is basically what we're doing with the established spurs. But the other thing that you might notice on this one is it's got quite a bit of new growth that was made last summer. This would have been pruned back last year. It wasn't spur pruned back, and then these buds here have grown, and we can see growing up through the centre of this wisteria, we've got this really long whippy growth that should have been taken out last year, but it wasn't. Doesn't matter, we can do it now. Now, if this were a young wisteria that you're training, we would use some of this, and if I just pull one of these down, this gives you some idea of the sort of growth that it can make. You know, this is 2, possibly 3 meters long, because it's had some already cut off there. It just gives you some idea how vigorous they can be. Now if this was young, you could probably tie this to a wire, and this would form eventually part of your permanent framework that we've got here. You know, some of these branches were tied to wires 100 years ago, and they started life as one of these tied in. We don't need them on this. Maybe in a few years we might want to replace some of the older wood, but for now we don't need them. So again, what we would do with these is we would just spur prune them back, again just above a bud, making sure you've got a nice sharp pair of secateurs. Prune them back like that, and then again that will encourage some spurs to develop on there, and new growth next year will be pruned off. So it's an ongoing pruning job that we do with them, just to keep them within their bounds basically. So these now need pulling out. So what I'm going to do now is take out all this wood that we don't need, all these shoots that we don't need, and then we'll look at some of the older wood that you might want to cut out. Very often, of course, with a wisteria, where you've got them growing up walls, you're going to need a ladder. So whether it's a step ladder or a ladder like this that I'm leaning against the wall, always make sure that it's securely anchored at the base so that it's nice and safe. But it's the easiest way, rather than reaching, just to climb a ladder and get up to them. Right, well there we go. What I've done now is I've taken out all those long whippy growths that were made last year that we didn't need, and I've gone through it and just thinned it a little bit, taken 1 or 2 of the flowering spurs out, and where we've got quite a bit of dead wood in there, that's all been taken out. So as you can see, not that much. Most of this in the pile is the new growth, but there's also some dead wood, which is something we do with any type of pruning, of course, and that I think makes it instantly look much better. I mean, this, bearing in mind, is a very old gnarled specimen, so it's grown away from the wall, but I think that's what gives it its charm. Now wisteria will grow from old wood, so if they do grow too far out, you can cut them back further into older wood. So for example, what you could do, if this is in the way, you could cut this back to here and it will grow, but of course you're going to lose your flowers for this year. It will make lots of vigorous growth through the summer that you prune in August, and then again this time next year. So you're going to be a year, potentially 2 years, before you get flowering wood again if you do heavy pruning. But I say with this one, I'm not going to bother, except I have made a decision about this one here, because this one is growing not only out, but it's also growing down, and this in the summer is a herb bed. Everything is died down now, waiting to grow, and it casts quite a bit of shadow on it. So what I'm going to do with this one here is actually prune this off, and it looks a little bit drastic, but it won't do any harm at all to the wisteria. It will grow back and make some new shoots from the point where I cut it. So this is obviously too big for my secateurs, too big for a pair of loppers, so I'm using a saw on this. This is a little hand saw, and I'm going to cut it off about here, just to leave almost a small stump, so any dormant buds then around this collar where it joins will then break in the spring, and just support the weight with one hand. We don't want it to tear. These saws are great because they work on the downward stroke, so very easy to use, and I'm just carefully cutting through that. And what will happen is we're going to have a nice clean cut there. Just take the support of that branch, so big branch gone, allows instantly a lot more light to the plants that are going to be growing here, and then what will happen from here is we will get some new growth. I can guarantee that we'll make new growth. We can spur prune that back, so we'll still then eventually get flowers hanging down to cover this piece of wall, but it's made the bed so much more open, and you can do that all over the place. So it's just a case of going through, doing all of those jobs: long growth, dead wood, thinning, making sure it's tied to the wall, and you'll have a fantastic plant for next year. One final thing, whatever type of wisteria you've got, make sure that this time of the year you give it a feed, and the feed to give it is sulphate of potash. Sprinkle a few handfuls around by the roots and it will pay dividends and give you wonderful flowers later on in the season. Well, thank you for watching, and please do keep telling all your friends about us. And remember, you can watch all of our gardening videos that we've done over the past few years on YouTube. So simply go onto YouTube and then search for Pots and Trowels, and it will bring up everything that we've got. So great way to see some of the things we've done in the past. Next week, we're going to be starting dahlias into growth. So we look forward to seeing you then. Bye.